Hey, hope you're all having a great day. Welcome to another conversation with WTF Talks.work. Hannah and I have a guest today, Karl. I'm looking very much to hearing from him talk about being a systematic leader and telling us some stories about his experiences where he has worked hard, told the truth, finished the job, and how those became important and how they've played out in his systematic leadership methods. So, Karl, thanks so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you at this morning? And tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. I'm an old man now, so I've had quite a bit of experiences. Um, but I started Systematic Leader back in 2019,
Okay.
and it was really around helping leaders coach their employees better.
Mm-hmm.
The questions that they would ask, the systems they put in place. And what I realized is I needed to take a step back because I was like, it's more than just coaching. It's about building systems in place so people understand the expectations that their boss has of them, the customers have of them, and how do you show the value that these people are working towards on a consistent basis, because I think that often doesn't happen. And I feel like, as leaders grow, they grow in a lot of different areas, and it really requires, self-awareness. And when you have that self-awareness, you start to realize, oh, I've got to put a system in place. I am not very good at my calendar. Oh, I'm not very good at, having, chit chat with people. Whatever it is, if you're not good at it, you've got to figure out how to work around it. And then you've got to double down on the strengths and build systems that really support those strengths.
Amazing. I love that. That sounds like a great process. I look forward to learning a little bit more about that. Um, the so Hannah was on your podcast a while ago. Hannah, what were you talking about on that podcast?
What do I always talk about? I was talking about all about Gen Zs.
Gen Zs.
I
Okay.
can't stop talking about it. It's never going to happen. So yeah, I think we were talking a lot about that, and then kind of the different systems within working with Generation Zs, and kind of like what people can do as best practices. But I think we really honed in on kind of the technology piece when we were talking, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
It was a
that's
while ago
great.
though.
That's great. I think, one of the things I love about the idea of systems and kind of really being intentional about the way you manage people. One of the things we talk about a lot in our business is the three I's, which are pillars on which we manage our staff. One, integrity. Integrity is table stakes. Like if you don't have integrity, you can't be part of our organization. And I recognize that integrity means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But for us, integrity is bringing your fullness to work every single day. Um, because your fullness is like you just can't mail it in. And so now some days, um, my wife was just reminding me of an employee that we had, and when his wife was pregnant, he was like 75%, 85% of his normal work output. It was just it was a lot. But once the baby was born, he was like back in a full way, and it was
Hmm.
never something we never talked about, but it was certainly something that I mentally took note of and was just trying to help manage around and manage my own expectations of a person in a different stage of life because his fullness wasn't available at the same level. And I think that we need to be understanding of that in our employees without giving them license to not fulfill their commitments. Um,
That's that's a bit of a system, but off track. So
no, no. So that's integrity. Intentionality is the systems that he's talking about, having a method through which you work with people. That's the intentionality. then intensity. Employees have to bring intensity to the systems in order for them to work. So I was just thinking about the 3 I's. So maybe
Sure.
that brings together that thought and makes it seem less crazy.
Gotcha. No, it does make sense. I just got sidetracked with it and was confused where we were going. But
Sure.
And I think I can maybe help close the loop, because I think what you're saying is every decision you make comes down to those 3 I's. Like if you're going to work with somebody, you want them to embody that. And to me, it's core values, right? Like those are core values that you have, and you need to see those core values, or that they align with those core values enough where you feel like, okay, yeah, they would be a good fit on this team. They would show up. And you're right. Sometimes it's 70%, and then sometimes it's 110%. I think Hannah told a story where I think somebody couldn't make it, and then you had to go and fill them. You had to drive like 4 hours, go fill in for them. And is one of the best things you've ever done. And I think that comes back to, your 3 I's and like, how do you show up? But then as a leader, you also have to show up so people see what you mean by that. You can't tell people to live a certain way and not embody that yourself.
yeah,
So
I,
true.
I forgot about that. It's like a little blimp in time from a little while ago, but
You,
yeah,
but you can't lead where you don't go.
sure.
And so you have to show up and show people that. So one of the things we want to talk about today was WTF, our work hard, tell the truth, finish the job um, framework. And so these were things that were super important to me as a kid. My parents beat these things into me. I in turn relayed them to our kids, and they become really the fabric of our business. But I'd love for you to tell a story, Karl, if you could, about a time when you were a youngin', when you were coming up in your career, perhaps, and maybe something more recent where working hard was super important to the moment and taught you a lesson that you brought forward either to your clients or to another role in your career path.
Yeah. So my dad was born and raised in Germany, came
Okay.
over here. So that that acronym fits really well with how I was raised, and how you look at things, because I think perspective is so important. If you see things as like, oh, this is a chore, you're going to give that type of energy off. If you look at this as like, okay, I'm going to try this, I'm going to see what comes next, and I'm going to give it my all, is much different. And I think, when I was coming up, there were times when I stopped caring, because I had one boss who told me a monkey could do a better job than I did on this particular project. And it's disheartening. It was
Sure.
awful. You laugh, right? And I can laugh about it now, but at the time I was like, I hated him. I was like, but I felt stuck. I felt like I had just started. I think I'd been there 3 months, so I couldn't just leave. I didn't feel like, I need to build up that resume to be able to get that next job. Stay at I think I was 22 years old.
Sure.
And I realized, looking back on that, his lack of integrity, his lack of values for his employees and appreciation. And I think that really kind of defined how I wanted to lead as a leader. And I think we all go through that. We all have things that really mess with us, that create that trauma. But in the end, we can either kind of, I guess, fall prey to it, or we can really just embody it and say, okay, what can I learn from this? And to me, that is one of the things that I look for in people, is the idea is, what can I learn from this? Even if
Sure.
you make a mistake at work, if you can say, what can I learn from this? You can really start to make strides to head in the right direction. Because, no matter what, if, like I worked with a client a few years ago, and he didn't have many systems around his employees. Like his thing was they should just do their effing job, you know? And I was like, okay, wow. But over time, he came around. We talked about core values. We talked about what made people tick and the systems in place to help support them. Because we kind of talked through some of that trauma he had growing up from, terrible bosses that he dealt with. And I think that's the thing is we can't let those things define us. And so as you put systems in place, you have to realize, okay, is this something that I want to be a part of my company? Is this something that will help people grow? Will this help me grow? And as you do that, you realize like a lot of systems you put in place was because an old boss did it, or because, that's the way your dad did it. And what you realize is you have to be able to review that and then incrementally change it. And I'm a big fan of Kaizen. That's the Japanese method of constant improvement. And I think when you build systems, you shouldn't just build a system because, okay, we need to get to point B. It should be a very, cognizant approach of like, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? And taking that step back makes you so much more likely to hit that goal and do it in a healthy way, but probably also a much more productive and prosperous way as well.
That's really good. Do you mind if we float back to that work experience with that employer for a little bit? I'd love to drill down on that with you a little bit.
Yeah.
So, what kind of work were you doing at the time?
So I was a marketing coordinator.
Marketing coordinator.
Just fresh out of college.
Okay.
And my dad knew the guy, and he was looking for a marketing coordinator. And it was a small valve and pump company in Pennsylvania. And so he took over the business from his dad. And that's kind of where I'm going. Like, he took it over. He probably didn't want to take it over. He probably was like, all right, fine. You need to retire. I'll take it over. But there's no really forethought around culture. There was no really self-awareness of how his actions made other people feel. And when you go ahead.
And that's a big thing. Like, you really do need to be aware of how your actions impact your employees and their ability to work in that structure. I'm always concerned about, and no offense to Hannah, but I'm always concerned about second generation business owners. In a lot of cases, where kids have been born on third base, and they're trying to act like they hit a home run when they score the first time. And that's not Hannah's thing at all. She really does WTF, and you can overcome being born on third base by not being entitled, but it's very difficult. It is very difficult. Have you seen other organizations or times when generational leadership changes have worked better or worked even worse than that?
Or perhaps just places that you've been where you've implemented systems and something's really turned around kind of after whatever it is that process was.
Yeah. So I worked with this other guy. We started really putting systems to create feedback from employees, from customers. And by doing that, you could see he realized how many mistakes, or I should say blind decisions, were being made because he wasn't really listening to the people that he hired, the people that he served as customers. And by putting those feedback loops into place, it made a huge difference. He started to realize like, okay, like if I do this thing, it is going to affect other people. And what ended up happening was he then was able to put people in better spots because he was listening to them. He was asking them questions and he was checking in on them. And what he ended up finding out was like, okay, like a lot of people were in the wrong seats. So some people he got rid of, just weren't a good fit, but a lot of people he kept and put in different seats. And it was a huge difference. Like one guy, he moved from kind of facilities, managing the facility to managing the lumber yard. And man, he took off. Like the guy was reinvigorated. And that was because, we started off with interviews. I was interviewing his employees, finding out these things, synthesizing through it, and then helping him say, okay, where else could we put these people? And and how do they fit? And then we started talking about the culture and the systems around that and what he did, to reinforce that culture. Because they did have core values, but they never talked about them in the meetings. They never talked about them, throughout the organization. And so he started creating that system. And
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And it can be challenging to be the leader that's talking about um, your values and your systems all the time, because like I can't tell you how often we get together with our team and I drop we're better together, and like the eye rolls are dramatic. And it is like there's a spot where you have to take some humor in it, and there's a spot where it's like, no, guys,
Well,
we are better together. Like, this is
there's
part of why we
also
chose the name.
there's also a really big difference between just like using our name and our slogan casually in a conversation and talking about like our core values, like
For sure.
why are we better together? What does that mean? Why did we state that? What is like feeding families one shift at a time? Like, what does it mean to swing the bat? What does it mean? Like, there are a lot of things that we talk about really consistently that are a part of our culture and our nature and the things that we discuss that don't get those eye rolls. But yes, when we drop that like a dad joke, it does get the eye rolls for sure. And sometimes they're from me. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I was watching a video of myself the other day and I rolled my eyes at you and I felt so bad. I was like, I cannot believe I just did that. It was so aggressive. But it's just like
Authentic. It was so authentic.
it was.
These
But
are the
those are
joys
the
of
type of conversations and those are the type of things you should bring up, right? Like it's okay to say, okay, yeah, maybe we didn't bring that up, or bring that we're better together up in the right way. And back to your point, Hannah, it's not, you can say that, but then maybe there is a story behind it. And this is, to me, is why stories are so powerful. Because like I interviewed somebody on my podcast, and one of the things he said was, instead of just telling this group of employees like, okay, we need to start documenting um, what these customers are doing. So basically it was like, okay, we need to keep track of this thing. And if you would have just gone and said, we need to keep track of this, then the employees probably would have been like, okay, yeah, I hear you. And then they probably just would have kept doing the same thing that they did. Now, the difference is he's told a story. He told a story about a guy who, instead of just saying, do this thing, he talked about his father. His father was elderly and he, couldn't fly very well, but they wanted to go on a trip. And so he had to fly from, I think, from Ohio. I'm totally butchering this, but bear with me. Ohio to Pennsylvania. And then once they got to Pennsylvania, they were going to, fly down to Florida, and then they were going to go on a cruise. Well, what they did is, it was like an early morning flight for his father. His father was like 84 years old. And then what ended up happening is he got to Pennsylvania. I think he landed at like, I don't know, something like midnight or 1, because the plane was delayed. And then their flight was at like 6 a.m. So they had to get up at 4. And so what ended up happening is the older man, his father, started to have issues on the plane. Well, in the middle of the flight to Florida, they had to stop and like land, because the father was had severe issues and he had to get hospitalized.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then he he's telling this story to his staff, and he's like, I realized my mistake. I wasn't looking for all the little details that could happen because of my father and his elderly state. And I almost killed my father because I was so caught up in trying to get to Florida so we could get to the cruise that I didn't do enough planning, enough understanding, and making sure that we dotted the T's and or crossed the T's and dotted the I's appropriately for his state, for his where he was at. And if we don't do the same thing in our company, if we don't understand what's going on and why we're doing these things, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to cause issues for our customers. And that is something we don't want to do. And if we are able to document these things and track them, we're going to be able to keep up with these things, and we're going to be able to help our customers earlier and not let things fall through the cracks.
Right.
And by telling that story, which is a really just a system of telling a story, instead of just telling somebody to do something, you tell a story of why it's important, and then you implement a system, and then you have a system, a feedback loop for that system, because then you can gather feedback from those employees.
That's a really good example. Yeah, so often as leaders, we get consumed with the outcome that we don't consider the process to get there. Yeah. And then even further removed would be the people that are actualizing and performing the process to get there. And so it's just very easy to get caught up in the forward motion that we feel as leaders, and not in the, okay, so how's that going to affect these 10 people? And what is their capacity to accomplish this? You know, one of the things that we talk a lot about is just helping people grow their capacity, but not everyone has the same capacity. Mm-hmm. Hannah's had a thing her whole life that, as her parents, we've been trying to dissuade her from. She's just running parallel, and not even always parallel paths, but like the way we refer to it in our house is trying to ride two horses with one ass. And in theory, you can't do that. But Hannah's capacity has shown that she can actually ride 2 or 3 or 4 horses, and her deliverability on that is high enough. It's not perfect, but it's high enough that she's accomplishing more than most people can. And so you want to be careful that you don't underestimate or overestimate people's capacity. My problem is overestimating people's capacity, typically.
But it's not necessarily that. You just think everything's easier than it is. You think everything takes
half the
time than it does.
Well, but when you said earlier, just do your effing job, you maybe didn't see Hannah roll her eyes or laugh, but that would be one of those off camera comments that I would make frequently. But I don't try not to say it to the person. I just like I try to understand their situation more, but I'm just like, sometimes I just don't understand.
But I think that that's absolutely just the nature of what Karl was discussing, like the upbringing that you had and the people that stood before you and what that looked like. But I'm curious, Karl, do you have any specific systems that you've put in place with different people that really stick out as just being, I want to ask about like ones that like really follow in line with the WTF philosophy, but I'm also curious if you have anything that sticks out that was just so random that someone never would have thought to put a system in place for this thing that you're like, you wouldn't believe the outcome that it had, like just the effect on the other side. Or there's some really interesting ones that you tend to develop that you're like, never would have put my finger on that, but so happy that it worked out.
Yeah. So couple feedback loops are important. I think every owner should be interviewing customers on a regular basis, any leader, because what you're going to find is, and you know, like I worked with a guy, and he interviewed over 50 of his customers, and it changed everything that he did. So now every quarter he tries to interview at least 3 to 5 customers. So throughout that, so at least like one a month. Sometimes he tries to do 2 a month. But what it does is it helps him keep the pulse of what his company is doing. So as you're doing it, what you're also doing is you're gathering this feedback. And then with AI, this is so amazing, is you just put this information into an Excel sheet, and then you ask the AI to help you synthesize through it. And so what you can do then is you gather this feedback, you have this data, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to find patterns. And this pattern recognition, like any leader, when you start to see what's working and what's not, you realize what you need to double down on and then what you need to start eliminating. And so what he did is he started, putting these things into place. It changed his marketing. It changed how he led. And I also think, and not many people do this, is interviewing employees inside of your organization is another great system. When you try to come with fresh eyes. Sometimes I've done the interviews for leaders because the people who want to please their boss, and it's a natural human thing, is to want to please the person that is paying your salary. So a lot of times if you have somebody else interview them, you'd be surprised what comes out. Like, it is honest, it's real. When you just sit down over Zoom or in person and you just say, okay, what's working for you? What's not working for you? And just dig and just start to understand, and do that for a whole hour. That's why I love podcasting so much, because you just relax and things just start bubbling up, and you just start saying things and you're like, oh yeah, like that thing from,
Right.
25 years ago. But what ends up happening is, to me, it's, when you can make good decisions, it's through patterns. And that's, to me, is like, lean into those strengths and try to work around your weaknesses. But it's also, like I said, doubling down on what's working well and start to eliminate the things that you're putting time and energy into, and it's not paying off for you. That having that ability to review that every quarter or every 6 months, depending on the business, is huge and can make so much difference to the decisions that you make, what you're trying to accomplish. And, you can really adjust that vision and be able to say, oh, wait, let's try this now. That's probably one of my favorites. And I have another one, but I'll stop there.
Well, no, you don't have to.
Okay.
Well, I suppose unless Dave has questions or comments. I was ready to keep listening.
No. I want another one. Give me more.
Okay.
Go.
Okay. So another one. This isn't mine. This is from somebody I interviewed. And then I actually implemented it with a client. But having core values is really key, kind of very similar to your 3 I's. But the idea is, from a company perspective, this is how we run. This is our beliefs. This is how we do things around here. And if you don't like it, that's fine. You don't need to stay here, but we really want people who believe in these type of things. And so she was having trouble with her culture. And so what we did is we had her come back to those core values, revisit them, talked about them with the team, how they resonated with them, how they didn't. And we also asked their people for their own core values and share them with the group. And then what we did is, for the takeaway, because like any good system, it's got to have a loop to it, right? So every Monday they have a team meeting, and in that team meeting, they talk about the core values. Eye rolls, right? Everybody's like, oh yeah, core values. But what she then instituted was asking everybody to say, how have you seen over the past week, the previous week, how did we live our core values? Did you see somebody live it? Did you live it? I want to gather these stories and share them with the company. And it's genius, because really what you're doing is you're getting people to share these stories. You're teaching people through storytelling because you're like, oh yeah, like I saw Stacy do this and she went the extra mile, and everybody's like, oh, she did that. Like, okay, like that's the type of behavior we're gonna have around here. Okay, like I guess I gotta start doing that. Or a really good idea would come up. Like, oh, I started doing this with a client, and then we started doing and then we instituted this, and man, my clients are so much happier. And I feel like that aligned with our excellence core value. But people are like, oh, you're doing that with your clients, like I need to do that too. And so it was this feedback loop. It was reinvigorating the core values
Sure.
every single Monday, but it was also teaching people the behaviors that you want to see on a day-to-day basis.
Right. I love that it's people seeing it in other people and being able to share a positive story about it. That's obviously something where not everyone shares a story every week, but that hopefully someone has seen the core value in another coworker in that week. And so there's always a story or a couple of stories. Would that be the case?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
So one of the questions I have for you, just kind of coming out of that, is like, how do you get people who clearly don't get or abide by the core values to self-select out? Because like firing them for not meeting the core values is really hard. Like in a lot of environments, you couldn't build a case to do that. Um, but like, so how do you get them to self-select out? Like, hey, this just isn't the place for you, and you know it, but I can't get you to quit.
I think this is why a coaching system is so important. It's coaching around the core values. And I think and this is Dr. Rosenthal wrote a book, Nonviolent Communication.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you point a finger at somebody, you're basically saying you aren't good enough, right? This is what most people hear. 99% of people are like, I'm not good enough and I can't keep up. And so what's happening then is they're going into survival mode inside the company, and they end up trying not to fail, which is like the worst thing, the type of culture you can create, because then nobody wants to try anything. No one wants to raise their hand. No one wants to go the extra mile because they're so afraid of what other people are going to think about them.
Sure.
So you've got to coach them and help them understand these are our values. This is why we do what we do. These are the reasons that we do it. And, we want you to succeed here, but we have to be able to live these core values at work. And so you're basically saying, hey, and this is where it gets tough. These are difficult conversations, and it's not coming back to the nonviolent communication. It's not saying you're not good enough. It's saying this is the standard that we have inside this company. These are the beliefs. These are the core values. And if we can't do that, then we have to find something else for you, maybe someplace else in the company, or help you find a job someplace else. We love and ... how you do this and this and this. But in this case, you're not living up to these core values. And it's not saying you're not good enough. It's saying you need to rise to this level. Otherwise, we're going to have more difficult conversations. And the idea is to coach them and help them get to understand that this is important and you're not going to back down. Because I think that ends up like, a boss will say something and then nothing happens 6 months later.
Right.
Maybe it's brought up again, and then 3 months later, and then all of a sudden the boss is like, I've been talking to this guy and nothing happens. So it's got to be really consistent, and it's got to be on a regular basis. Depending on how important it is and what the position is, it could be a weekly basis, but it's probably more like a bi-weekly, monthly, regular conversation. And then metrics, right? Like,
Right.
okay, we are, if you are an outbound sales person and you end up calling 6 people a day, that's not good enough, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
that's an obvious one, but there's so
sure.
many other metrics too, right? Like
Sure.
showing up to work
Let
on
me
time
let
and
me
all
ask
that.
you this question. What percentage, and then we'll let Hannah ask a question because she obviously has one.
I just
Um,
really like something you said, but keep going.
okay, great. Um, what percentage of business owners that you know or have met with, not necessarily that you've done business with, but that you're talking to, um, despite what they say about driving a high performance culture or whatever, um, don't actually do it, and they settle for underperformers, and they avoid the crisis of you got to go.
Hmm. It's over
And specifically
50%.
business owners as opposed to managers, because managers have a different freedom than owners do, I believe.
Hmm. I would say I mean, and it's a level, right? Like you can't have all A players. A players would just create probably a toxic work environment where everybody's competing with each other and trying to outdo each other.
I'd be
No, I'm
willing
not
to
saying.
try it. I'd be willing to try it and fail though. Um,
But you need some B players. You need people who
right.
can, and this is where, personalities are, it's so important to mesh, right? If you
Hmm.
have everybody that's like, fighting the grain and like, calling people out and, really pushing and pushing and pushing, you're just and people are going to get burned out. So it needs to be a balance, right? Like,
Sure.
and I think, every company's different. Like Elon Musk is a unicorn in the fact that he can just get A players who, want to see his vision of getting to Mars, and I know Elon has a lot of haters and, and fanboys, but the idea is you have to understand, and that comes back to that self-awareness. You have to understand how you like to operate. What are those systems you can put in place to help you? Because in the end, if you push, people are going to burn out. But if you get too laid back, people are going to take advantage. So you have to set that tone, and you've got to be able to understand. And that to me is feedback loops, understanding what's working well for people and what's not. And then how do you keep adjusting as you go? So almost like month to month, quarter to quarter, people are working on different projects that fit their strengths. People are finding new ways to reinvigorate themselves because, like, let's say you're in accounting, that can get probably pretty tedious, and like your brain is wired to be creative. How do you help them?
Hmm.
I interviewed a guy who he put in place. And it's funny, a lot of my interviews, I take these systems and then I apply it to my clients. But he had this great system that once a month they would have cross-functional meetings where cross-team meetings. So like IT guy would be with marketing, and what he realized is he was getting people to find different things and issues and share it with each other. And then they could come up with solutions together in these smaller team meetings. So the IT guy was like to the marketing person, why don't you automate that? Automate this part of the email process, automate this part of the social posting. And the marketing person just didn't think to go there. And he saved that person, I think it was like 8 hours a week or something like that. And when you do those cross-pollinating type of things, that's a system, but you can't, this is the hardest part for people, is to do that, put that system in place and then see if it's working or not, but give it time to see if it's working or not. Because, I don't know, maybe some companies, they don't, the IT people and the marketing people hate each other, and if you throw them in the same room, you're just going to cause fights. But
Sure.
there are
And that's the thing about Kaizen, right? Is when you try something, you have to evaluate it, and make sure that it's working. That's your feedback loop. And then a
Exactly.
post evaluation after it's running. So often we put systems into place, set it, forget it, and don't go back. And it could be broken, very broken. And we're not seeing that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because we're
Yeah,
like, we need to get to point B.
sure. Hannah, what was the point that you thought was so great before that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I don't need to talk about it. We're coming to the end of our time, and I don't want to keep us past that. But I did just really like your statement around the worst thing that a person can do is try not to fail, because that was just so good. The
Mm,
worst thing you can do to yourself is try not to fail, because it means you're not trying to succeed. Like, all you're trying to do is sustain, and that's not going to really get you anywhere. And so that's just a really good kind of a mental tick. I really liked that. But
sure.
I would very quickly push back on your comment around an entire team not being able to have A players. I think, and maybe this is just the way that I'm perceiving what you're saying, but it sounds like you're saying a full team can't be made of sharks, which is true, but there are lots of owls or whatever, like disc, whatever area you sit in, depending on the personality type, that is an A of that personality type. And I think that those players play really well together. I think it's nearly impossible to find all of those people and put them in a room together. And if you can do that, please call us and let us know so you can come on the pod and tell everybody. But I think that, and was that incorrect? Were you talking about like that single kind of personality shark, D, high profile, like that kind of
For
team
sure.
can't exist together? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But just as we're kind of wrapping up, because we only have a couple of minutes left, give us one tip, and I'd love to know if it is go back, evaluate, and reconfirm that what you're doing is still right, on just kind of best practices for if people are moving forward, they want to put systems in place, but they're like very overwhelmed. How do I start? What's kind of the first thing, the best thing that they can do? And then also, if they don't want to do it alone, how do they find you? How do we connect with you? How do we help people really get this going for themselves?
Yeah, I like the concept of time to value. Whenever you do something, how fast can you get value out of it? And this is a very common theme when helping customers. If you can help a customer, within a day, within a week, and really show the value of the work of the product, it makes them that much stickier. And so when you do that, you really have to measure. And this is, to me, is why, having a customer feedback loop and interviewing customers, and that's where I would start. Like, if you're not sure, you're trying things in your marketing, you're doing all these things, but you're not sure what's working. It really comes back to your systems. And to me, it's okay, then find out what is working well for your customers. Create a little interview guide, reach out to your customers and sit down with them and talk with them. To me, that is it. Every time I do them, they're eye opening. Every time I share that information with the client, they're just so appreciative, because they are like, "Ah, I didn't even think of that." Like, your customers want you to succeed, but you have to be willing to listen to them and then take that feedback and not let the ego get in the way. Because I
Mm,
think that,
Mm,
to me, is what holds a lot of people back from having difficult conversations with customers, but also their employees, because their ego is like, okay, I don't want to actually hear what is coming out of their mouth. So
sure.
if I don't ask, then everything's okay.
yeah.
Oh, and
Patrick Lencioni said, the ideal team player is hungry, humble, and
mhm,
smart, people smart particularly. And that
Mhm.
humility piece is really big for a leader to be able to source um, disparaging opinions. Is
Yeah.
if you're in a vacuum, you're in trouble. So
yeah,
sorry, that's
no,
great.
it's okay.
I
Uh,
like that.
and where people can go, I have a podcast called Systematic Leader. My website, systematicleader.co.co. Yeah, so uh, my main thing is helping people with customer experience systems, and then often that will lead to other things that they're working on from a culture perspective or from an employee perspective. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was so great to chat again. I know that our podcast is out, so if people want to listen to that, they can go back and find that from ours on yours. Or if they want to listen to Dave's with yours, you guys are going to be chatting in a couple of weeks. So there's all the information, all the content to listen to if this was fun and you're curious still. But I think that was really great. There was a couple of really good stories in there. I think that can really stick for some of our listeners and help them remember how to carry these things forward. So that'll be really good. But Dave, anything else?
Yeah, Karl, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. You've shared some great insight. I'm really stuck on the concept of feedback loops. That's one of the takeaways that I've really got from you today, and I'm looking forward to pursuing that in our business and in the conversations that we have with people going forward. And then just remind everyone, systematicleader.co. That's how you connect with Karl, systematicleader.co. Look him up, reach out to him. Thank you so much, Karl. I appreciate you joining us.
Oh, thank you. This was a blast.
Great.
Bye,
Have a great day.
everybody.